Well, it's been a really productive winter, down to the last few days before the semester begins, actually, the day after tomorrow. So, I've done enough lemons, and with all that practice, I should be able to do my own self portrait now. So, I'm going to just map out how I would go about my self portrait. This is basically you're watching a poor man's underground atelier, and so I already put and toned my canvas with a dark umber. It's on stretch canvas, and it's got a nice texture to it, a little bit of tooth. It's not super smooth. I like the rough. I like the drag it gives me. Got my mirror set up right over here, so I'll be referencing, to the mirror and doing all my measurements for the landmarks on my face, which from this angle, hairline to eyebrows, eyebrows to the bottom of the nose, bottom nose to bottom of the chin, breaks out into about a third. My overall face is somewhat square, and then positioning of my eyes, as usual for most, right in the center of the space. So I'm going to use a gray. I'm going to use a combination of titanium white and zinc white, and then add a little bit of combination of colors for black, and basically start off that way. I don't want too bright of color, so that I don't have to worry about trying to cover it up later on. Hopefully the hues I choose will make it easier just to blend in. So basically I'm mixing a color, it's somewhat a neutral gray, with some terpenoid, so it's kind of really fluid. And so I'm thinking about, basically I'm going to be working live scale, maybe slightly smaller, but I'm trying to think of overall placement, and using the rule of thirds or the golden mean is always a good idea, to give you a nice composition overall and layout design. And so I'm just kind of using my hand as a sense of measuring my face, my actual face, and where do I want to position it. So I would recommend, if you're doing a self-portrait, there are a lot of wonderful rules and tips and great advice out there, plenty of books, plenty of videos, but find what works for you. So I find for myself, I like to actually physically get a sense of where I want to position, say, my head, my face. I don't want it right in the center or too far up, too far down. Truth is, on the whole, I believe you would find that most people find that odd proportions versus even proportions are a bit more visually interesting. So again, not placing something dead smack in the center, or too high or too low, and rather than too much to one side or the other, just slightly off center. And I would recommend slightly higher than lower on your overall picture plane. Just as you're matting, the same thing. You give an extra half inch or an inch to the bottom measurement versus the sides and the top. But no, that's another discussion for another point. But for right now, I've got a sense of right about here. So I'm going to position in my top line of my head there, and I'm going to figure something right about here. And again, just very loose. These do not have to be the actual specific proper proportion measurements. Let's see, then I'm just going to lay down a center line for my face, just to line up both sides of my face with some measuring reference. Okay, and so the top line here, you're figuring, is that the hairline or is that the top of the head? So make adjustments for that. In this situation, I'm going to make it the top of my head to allow enough negative space to fly over the top. So I'm going to come down a bit for my hairline, and now I will divide it up into the 3 equal proportions. As I mentioned, the hairline to the eyebrows, eyebrows to bottom of the nose, bottom nose, bottom chin. That's pretty close. Again, these are approximate. You're trying to approximate the positioning. You can always make corrections, and you will be making adjustments all the time, especially if you want to get the likeness, or if you're trying to get the likeness that's on your driver's license, like on mine. You can make a lot of mistakes and still claim it's you. For some reason, as I've gotten older, my facial features have gained their own sense of independence from one another. Now, some people, when they take a picture, they smile and everything's working together. It's just beautiful, beautiful pictures time and time again. For me, when somebody says smile, my eyes act independently of one another. Eyebrows, eyeballs, my nostrils, even my mouth. So right when somebody takes a picture of me, all of my features are acting on their own, and it shows up. And so my driver's license, the most recent real ID, I look like I'm heavily under the influence of something. Oh well. Anyway, so I blocked this out like this. Now I'm going to go for my hairline. And now there's many different ways to proceed from here. Quite often you'll see in the artists who will measure that proportion, hairline to bottom chin, in comparison to the width of the head or the width of the face. And in my case, it is not equal. You'll see some people who will do an equal square. But again, that's your choice. Again, I'm just approximating, just roughing in, and most of us, we know our face by now. And in my 65th year, I'm pretty familiar with my face. So, jawline, things like this. What is the overall shape? Now, bear in mind, I'm going to make adjustments, because once I figure out the proportion of my mouth and where it sits between the bottom of the nose and my chin, I'm going to take the corners of the mouth and go straight back. And on the average, that's generally where the jaw line starts to change its angle into a more extreme kind of descent, and I'm making that correction now. Now, some people's mouths, in the so-called perfect proportion, from the bottom of their chin to the bottom of the nose, the middle line of their mouth is about 2/3 up from the bottom. In my case, the middle of my mouth is half of that. So I'll just go ahead and block that shape in there now. And as I look in the mirror, I realize everybody has, on the average, one eye shape between the two. Now, on some faces, some actual looking front on, there is room to put 5 eyes across. I find on the whole, most people, you have 1, 2, 3, and about half an eye on each side. In my case, it's almost 5 across. So I figured out already, see here, right here, my eyes fit half of the overall shape of the head. So I just lay that in right there. And again, you're going to make changes, corrections throughout this whole process. But if you just want to approach it from direct observation, you know, I would recommend this is one of the approaches you consider. So I already mentioned I have one eye width between my two left and right. So I'm just going to block in that measurement now, basically allowing for one eye shape between, and almost a little over half of an eye to go from the here to the side, here to the side. We'll continue on some other videos. I'll share the process, and so I won't just say, okay, here's a few marks and then show you the finished piece. I will show you some steps along the way.